The concept of gamification is often confused with the idea of a game. Sometimes a person will say they want gamification when what they really want is a game, and vice versa. So let's take a moment to both sort out the differences between games and gamification, but also let's look at some of the similarities. Knowing both the differences and the overlap between the two will help you to make intelligent decisions about when gamification is most appropriate. First, let's define the word game. A game is a system in which players engage in an abstract challenge defined by rules, interactivity, and feedback, resulting in a quantifiable outcome or objective, often eliciting an emotional reaction. Within a game, rules, aesthetics, and dynamics are integrated, requiring the player of the game to enter into the game space, which has its own version of reality, rules, and sensibilities. A game is an activity in and of itself with little or no overlap with other activities. When you play a game, disbelief is suspended. Traditional rules are no longer in play, and game activities have consequences only within the game. For example, in the game Monopoly, a player rolls the dice and moves a piece around the board. If he or she lands on a space owned by someone else, they pay rent. But the money is not real, it's monopoly money, and the hotels or houses on the property are not real, they're abstractions of houses and hotels. They don't have meaning outside of the game Monopoly. You can't live in a Monopoly house and you can't spend Monopoly money in a real store. So the idea of a game is that it's just a self-contained unit where elements are so integrated that you can't separate them. Paying rent on a Monopoly property is meaningless outside the context of the game Monopoly. Gamification, on the other hand, is different. It's not about playing a game or using a self-contained game for learning. Rather, gamification is taking parts or elements of games and applying those elements to learning activities to engage the learners. For example, an employee might earn points for answering the daily question about safety, or an organization may award a badge to an employee for demonstrating mastery of a specific skill. Or a learning module might begin with a challenge instead of learning objectives. Points, badges, and challenges are all parts of games, but used by themselves or in limited combinations don't create an entire game experience. In gamification, the goal is to use elements and parts of games to engage the learner. It's not about playing a game, it's about engagement. If we drill down further into gamification, we can define two distinct types: structural gamification and content gamification. Structural gamification is placing a game structure around the content without changing the content itself. For example, answering the daily question and earning points or earning a badge for achieving mastery. Content gamification is when the content itself is altered to become more game-like. An example of this would be starting an e-learning module with a challenge rather than objectives. The content of the module and the learning objectives have to be reworked to be converted into that challenge that the learner needs to overcome. As you can see, games and gamification are not the same thing, but they are closely related and they do overlap simply because you couldn't have gamification without games. Now that you understand the difference between the two, you can begin to make decisions about matching the right game or gamification design to the right learning situation.